So guys, everybody in the press has been saying that the club is a mess and we've embarrassed ourselves through the summer and our transfers were a nightmare and we wasted money and we embarrassed ourselves with bids, but we're not really sure that's entirely true. So what we've done is go through all the papers, look at all the blogs, listen to the sources coming out of the clubs and see what they've been saying to really sort of work out what's actually happened through the summer and whether or not we actually did do a good job. We're going to sort of evaluate it now. First up, Ander Herrera. So this one's pretty straightforward. It all comes down to money. United offered somewhere between 20-26 million for the player. That didn't meet Athletic Bilbao's evaluation. They thought, well, they wanted the full buyout clause, which was 30.5 million, and frankly, United weren't going to meet it. And that meant that the interest in the player and negotiations actually stopped on Sunday night, the day before the window closed. So all the reports that followed on the Monday saying, oh, the deal's close, everything's nearly done, that was all rubbish. And that was because of the 3 suited lawyers. So who are these lawyers, we hear you ask? Well, we don't know everything, but what we do know is it was 3 men from a law firm called Lefer. The Spanish league briefed the press and said that these guys were acting on behalf of Manchester United, but the club came out and said that wasn't the case and that all briefings will come out of Old Trafford when we're talking to players. So don't believe everything you hear. Now, what has the player said? Well, Ander Herrera has come out and said that there was a bid for him, United were interested, but that it didn't meet the valuation, so it ended there. Was that as bad as the press made out? No. Was it shambolic? No. Next up, Mesut Ozil. The player was offered to us apparently 3 weeks before he signed for Arsenal and for a lot less than the 42 point whatever million they paid for him. The problem here is though is that we've got Khedira and we've got Rooney, so he doesn't really fit into the team despite the fact that he's obviously incredibly talented. We don't really have anywhere to put him, so what's the point? It never really got started for that very reason. Next, Sami Khedira. The player said in a press conference there was an offer, Real Madrid weren't interested, £40 million apparently, didn't happen. That's it. We also went for Sami Khedira's teammate, Fabio Coentrao, and that fell apart despite the fact that the player's signature was on the paperwork. Everything was signed our end and their end. However, the big twist in this one is that Real Madrid weren't going to sell him until they'd bought his replacement, Shakira, see a little joke there. So basically that fell apart because they couldn't get a replacement, so they wouldn't put their paperwork in, despite the fact that actually it was all done and dusted and we had the player. So the lesson there is maybe don't leave it to the last minute. And why did we leave it to the last minute? That we still don't know. Yeah. Fabregas, yeah, very, very strange. We're not really sure what happened. Reports suggest the club were encouraged to bid for the player and that he'd be interested in the move. But why? Why would he be interested in the move? Well, there's this talk that he's been agitated by a lack of first-team appearances, but that's not really the case. Last season, despite Victor Valdez, he started more games than anybody else at Barcelona. Maybe it's the big games, though, that he wants. That could be the case, dropped against teams like Real Madrid. Whereas if he was at Manchester United, he would be a star man. He wouldn't be overshadowed by the likes of Xavi and Messi and so on. Now, did people take advantage of us with a new manager and new backroom staff? Yeah. Did we look a bit silly? Yeah. Thiago. This one ran on for weeks and weeks and weeks, but it's actually quite simple. Sadly, simple doesn't sell newspapers. We've been monitoring the player for about 3 years, but eventually David Moyes decided that he wasn't entirely convinced and he didn't think the player was up to it in the Premier League. It is straightforward. Moyes, he changed his mind, didn't want the man. Bayern Munich came in, offered the buyout clause, they bought him. Easy. Nothing doing. So would Thiago have made it in the Premier League? We don't know. What we do know is that David Moyes is known for his meticulous scouting process, and clearly he wasn't convinced by the player, so there must have been something. Leighton Baines. We wanted him, we went for him, we offered our derisory, insulting bid, but what it came down to is that Everton were not up for losing 2 of their key players, and Moyes obviously rated Fellaini more, so we got Fellaini in. That's it. Right, so let's talk about David Moyes. A lot of people are pointing the finger of blame directly at him, which when you think about it is absolutely rubbish. He took his job on the 1st of July, so the transfer window was open for 2 months while he's been there. Now, in that time, he has got to learn a new transfer market. It's not the same one he's had at Everton. He's operating in a completely different price bracket, looking at completely different players with an entirely new staff. Next is what must have been his priority, meeting the current first team and working with those players, working out who he rated, who he didn't rate, and where he thinks that we needed to make improvement. He must have spotted early doors, yeah, we could do with another midfielder, but he still had to work everything else out and look at who he rated and who he didn't. And that's been completely ignored by everybody so far. People saying, oh, why wasn't he buying players straight away? Well, he did have to work out what was going on. Plus, on top of that, is the Wayne Rooney issue. Let's not underestimate or ignore how much time and effort would have gone into making sure he stayed at the club, which was a success. He has stayed at the club, which is obviously what David Moyes wanted. So let's not ignore that, because he had his agent moaning about things, trying to slip stuff into the papers. There was Chelsea making their bids and talking in the press. And despite all that, I mean, Rooney was very moany, but he kept his head down, he didn't come out and say anything, so he did enough to actually keep the player, and that's very important. So when it came down to it, what time did Moyes actually have? to try and sign a player? Not a lot, really. So to sum up, could some of our transfers have gone better this time round? Yes, absolutely. But is it understandable that we had these problems? Yes, absolutely. And will this happen again next window? No, of course it won't. We've got new people learning new jobs, so that's fine. And our top tip, David, if you're watching, is do your business early. Identify your targets straight away, get them in early, pay what you see as fit, and then you can sit back and have a laugh and watch everybody else scrap around at the end.
They haven't improved their squad that much. They bought one player for 45 million. And all of a sudden, everything's rosy. And I think a lot of United fans just expect that to happen. They want us to go out and spend 50 million. If we went out and spent 50 million on another striker, they'd probably all be going to sleep last night happy. It's stupid. You need to spend money sensibly. The thing that has really got on my nerves is how we have gone about our business this summer. It's been an absolute joke.